Now, recently, the jury in a court in Bristol considered the case of 4 people who had confessed to their part in pulling down a statue of Edward Colston, slaver and philanthropist. The verdict was not guilty, a result likely to pose all manner of legal complexities in the future. All of that notwithstanding, my next guest feels it's high time all of us paid attention to the wider story of Britain's involvement in the slave trade. Having been an enthusiastic participant in the human misery of it all in the 18th century, Britain dedicated fortunes and many lives to dismantling the trade in the 19th century. The author of an article calling for broader understanding of a complex and fascinating story is Conservative MP David Davis. Joins me now. Thanks for coming in again.
My pleasure.
This is a story that I think it's so broad-ranging. It's very hard to contemplate saying much meaningfully about it in so short a space of time, but we must attempt it. What did you make, first of all, of that verdict in Bristol?
On the one hand, I sort of agreed with the protesters about Colston. I just didn't agree with the way they did it. You know, there's a better democratic way to do these things. But the other thing about it was, and the jury basically voted, I think, as the defence attorney argued, with history rather than with facts, with what they felt was the sort of moral position. But it worried me slightly because my knowledge, and I guess most historians' knowledge, of our history in the slave trade is not one of dark times. I mean, some of it is, as you said. I mean, we were party to shipping over 3 million slaves, along with every other maritime power. But Britain, and Britain alone, actually brought this whole trade to an end through a fantastic exercise of diplomatic activity, of political activity, of literally giving up money, giving up the financial, but also an enormous military operation on the west coast of Africa.
Then that dismantling of which you speak is often routinely dismissed as mere expediency, economic and political expediency, but you would counter that.
Oh yeah. I mean, look, there is a namesake of mine called David Breon Davis, who's he died a few years ago, but he's a Yale professor who's a great expert on slavery, and people should read him about the effect of the Enlightenment. You know, the way people's views changed, and before 300 years ago, slavery was accepted everywhere in the world, pretty much. Not everybody took part in it, but everybody accepted it, and for thousands of years. And then all of a sudden, you know, you had the comments of philosophers suddenly started getting political purchase. You know, Pitt made a big speech when he was Prime Minister. Then a few years later, in 1807, we moved a big movement. And then after that, Castlereagh, Palmerston, all committed a sixth of the Royal Navy, the biggest navy in the world, to go to a place where the annual death rate was 6%, obviously from action, but also from yellow fever and malaria. And sailors volunteered year after year. We had captains using their own money to buy ships so they could catch the slavers. You know, we had one of them being sued in the London courts because he'd done that. They were disobeying orders effectively because you didn't have phones in those days, so they'd be going into Brazilian ports or going down the African coast and stopping the African kingdoms actually from taking slaves. All sorts of fantastic, almost stories of daring do, like out of Hornblower, but really driven by this common moral cause. This wasn't people calculating what's our national interest. It was people doing something that was right.